I'm going to sit down too now. Are we set for me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Obviously, our subject is dialoguing with the subconscious, and those of you who've experienced working with me know that I encourage that. It's one of the most important links in the chain of command. I find it quite intriguing in what we call the communication age, where communication is such a vital aspect of our society, and it's not just one-to-one and so on, but it's everywhere, and people carry around cell phones and beepers and all kinds of things like that that keep them in touch with the rest of the world and make them available to the rest of the world. Do you realize how available people are when they have those things on? However, the availability of the conscious mind to the subconscious and vice versa is not that common. Unfortunately, people's communication with their subconscious is not nearly as good as it is with the everyday world. There is an open line of communication. Everything you think is a form of communication with your subconscious. And everything that comes to consciousness is a form of communication from the subconscious. So it's going on anyway, but how many people listen? How many people listen to their inner self, or if you want to say their subconscious self, and do it on a regular enough basis to where it becomes your communication with your own best friend, because that's what the subconscious is. And because that communication is so many times faulty, inappropriate, even downright dangerous, people end up having negative consequences of those communications. We all hear about the power of positive thinking, right? Everybody's heard that. Well, unfortunately, the power of negative thinking is much more commonly used, and it is actually in many respects more powerful than positive because it's much more constant in people's minds. The communication between the conscious and the subconscious is, as they say, constant. Have you listened in lately? Have you? I'm going to ask you this question because I think this is really important. When somebody else is talking to you, and if you're having a conversation with someone, are you really listening? Truly listening? Or are you, part of you is listening and the other part is thinking about what that other person is saying and what you're going to say next? That's not listening. That's not having all channels open to what the other person is saying, because it isn't just verbal communication that a person is offering you. It's all the other aspects of communication, body language and so on, right? Now, the subconscious picks up body language all the time, much more better than you do, and it interprets it on a much more holistic approach than your conscious mind does. But when we talk about dialoguing with the subconscious, we're talking about direct communication between the conscious and the subconscious mind. And even though that is happening all the time, out of your range of consciousness a lot of times, because the conscious mind is not really aware of how it's communicating with the subconscious. When you do an actual dialogue with your subconscious, you are then approaching your subconscious as you would someone else, in a sense, kind of face to face. Now, what's your concept of your subconscious? Because that's really very important when we're talking about communication, because usually when you're communicating with someone else, someone that you're sitting face to face with, or even on the telephone, and even if you haven't met that person on the phone, you have a concept of that person, all right? You have an image, you have a sound of their voice, you have an idea about their personality, right? So you kind of know somewhat about who you're talking to. If it's just a voice on the telephone, you're formulating subconsciously as much as consciously an image in your mind of the other person, right? The tone of their voice tells you something, whether they're friendly, whether they're officious, whatever. And if it's a friend, what their state of being is, right? In other words, if they're in a good mood. How many times have you answered the phone and your friend's on the other end and you hear the voice and you say, "What's the matter?" Because you hear something in that voice that implies that something is not quite right. This is what your subconscious does all the time. It senses the tonal quality of your communications of every single second, of every minute, of every hour, of every day. In your waking state, your subconscious is attuned to your conscious mind. And that's what gives the conscious mind some of its power. Because everything you say, everything you think, is going back down to your subconscious. And it has to deal with that. So when you communicate with other people, are you more careful than when you communicate with yourself? Do you watch your words a little bit better? Make sure that you formulate your communication to be as effective as you possibly can. Do you do that when you're communicating with yourself? I don't think so. Most people don't do that. They're rather careless. I had a lady in the office just the other day, and she spilled some water on herself in my office, and she said, "I am so stupid." And I cringed because I was where her subconscious was, not poor subby. And I said to her, "Is that what you want your subconscious to think?" And she said, "Well, look at me, I'm all wet now." And she was wanting to defend her argument against herself, and I had to turn her around with that. But that's the kind of thing, and she did not realize what she was imposing on her subconscious, and that is going to come back to her at some time. If she makes a mistake like that again, that maybe the subconscious will bring that back up. "You're so stupid." So it's what goes down comes back up again. When we're talking about direct communication with the subconscious, and when you, for example, when you give a suggestion in hypnosis or a command with you control mind mastery, that's a very direct communication. It's one-way communication. Because a lot of people get this mixed up. They say to me, "Well, I dialogue with my subconscious all the time." And I say, "Oh, that's great. What's happening? What's the communication? What are you learning?" "You mean, what am I learning?" "I'm telling it what to do." Well, that's not a dialogue. That's a command. That's an instruction. A dialogue is a two-way communication, give and take. A conversation that you have with your subconscious. And it's so important to have these conversations. I think you all know that, those of you who have been to Mind Mastery know that what I teach in Mind Mastery is that dialoguing can literally save your life. I know it saved mine. So that's how important it is. And all the things that you know or think you know about yourself, all of your ideas, everything there is to know about you lies within your subconscious. There isn't anything about you that your subconscious does not know. It is you, another aspect of you. A lot of people get this mixed up because they have this idea that the subconscious is some kind of other entity that resides within them. And it really isn't. It is you. It's just another aspect of you. So if you think of your subconscious as a separate entity, when you're dialoguing with it, when you're communicating with it, as if you're talking to some other person, your relationship with it is not going to be nearly as good as if you understand that it's completely you. It is you. It's not a different, it's just another aspect. Let's think of it like this. So to help you understand it a little bit better. You have a heart and you have lungs. These are two organs of your body. Now one is not going to work without the other, right? They both serve very, very useful purposes for your survival, your living. So think of it this way. The subconscious is another organ of your mind. The conscious mind is another organ. And these organs communicate with each other just as the heart and lungs communicate biologically with each other. And so in your communication with your subconscious, don't think of it as you're talking to a separate, different entity or another person or even another personality, because your subconscious isn't a personality. It isn't a person. You are a person who has a subconscious. Now your subconscious is all-knowing, okay? It knows everything, as I say, about you. It knows all the reasons you've ever done what you've done, the reasons you haven't done what you haven't done. It understands everything there is to know about you. So to get in communication with your subconscious is vital to not just to your understanding of yourself, but also in helping you use that understanding so that you can grow from that and that experience. And how many times have you felt blocked in your life and not understood the reason that you haven't been able to move forward? If you've had some inhibition, or if you've had some other things going on, some things that you've attempted to do, and no matter what you've done, you haven't been able to do it. And people say, why? Why is this? I'm doing my best. I've tried everything. Well, first of all, let's get it straight. Don't ever, ever ask your subconscious why. Never. Get out of the habit of asking why anyway. Because why is an unanswerable question anyway. And yet people ask that all the time. You know, it's interesting, people answer. People answer that. Let me explain to you the reason it's not a good idea. First of all, when you ask the question why, you haven't really thought your question out very well. You've got a general idea about what you want to know. So you're hoping that whoever you're asking the why to is going to have that answer. You haven't been specific, so how can they necessarily answer? Often when you ask why, you're not even quite specifying what it is that you need to know. So avoiding that for that reason. Also, let's help you understand this. Your subconscious mind, let's try to help you perceive of it in this way. It's not a child, but it's very childlike. Now, those of you who've dealt with children know very well. If you ask a child why, what do you usually hear?
I don't know.
Because, or I don't know. Right. Those two answers are pretty common. I don't know means mind your own business, I'm not telling you. Or I don't want to deal with that. Maybe it can't even be explained. It was an impulse or whatever. So that's not a good thing, right? The because is also interesting. Because to a child explains everything. And if you don't know, Mum, it's too bad. You don't know. Are you that dumb, Mum? You don't know? I said because. Because explains everything as far as a child is concerned. Now, on the other hand, the conscious mind is like an adult. It thinks more like an adult. And adults, when you ask them why they did something, they're going to rationalize it. And that happens, and it kind of justifies it. Oftentimes, too, if you ask an adult why they did something, they back off. They feel intimidated. They feel they're being questioned in they've done something wrong. So why did you do that? Which implies you shouldn't have done that. Why also can have that kind of intimidating, attitude to it. So here we have a dilemma. If we ask why question, the subconscious is probably going to say because. And the adult part, the conscious mind, is going to rationalize it, which justifies it, which gives you permission to do it. You've just given yourself permission to do it. So why is not a good question. Don't do it. And keep in mind, you need to formulate your question very specifically when you approach your subconscious. It's very good at generalizing, and it's also very paradoxical in nature. So unless you ask your question carefully, unless you ask it in a way that your subconscious can understand, you're not necessarily going to get the answer you're seeking. Also, very importantly, do not ask questions the way an attorney would when he's leading a witness. And the only way that you would do that, at any time you would do that, would be if you were going to use the subconscious to do it indirectly, or directly through what we call the ideomotor response. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but what that means is, for example, in hypnosis, you can go ask the subconscious yes or no questions and use a finger-raising technique to get the subconscious to answer yes, no, or I don't know. And then you have to formulate the question in exactly the same way that an attorney would lead a witness. Is it this? Is it that? Is it the other? In other words, is the reason that I overeat because I love food? So now you've implied an answer. Your subconscious is now forced to answer yes and no. Now, if you're going to get an ideomotor response, where you're not getting to get a verbal communication, those kind of questions can be helpful. You still have to formulate them very, very carefully, though. Because then if you're going to ask for a yes or a no, you have to make sure that you cover all the bases. And it could be yes and no answers that you're going to get, so both fingers may raise. So formulating the question is very important. Don't lead the issue when you're doing a direct communication with your subconscious in a verbal sense, in other words, thought-wise. So formulating the question. So that's very, very crucial. And what do you really want to know? And you know, here we come to a very important element too, is that so many people will ask their subconscious a question and they don't really want to know. They're scared to know. So they'll ask the question in a sort of hesitant way. It's like a gentleman doing a dialogue in my office recently, and he was asking the question, and you could tell by just the tone of his voice and the way he was approaching the question, he was scared of the answer. So and this is what happened, and it's such a common thing. He asked the question, and about 5 seconds later he opened his eyes and says, "There's nothing there." I said, "Well, you didn't wait very long." He said, "Well, if my subconscious knows the answer, it would tell me." I said, "Well, you didn't give it time." So then I said, "Do it again." And he was making all kinds of excuses not to ask the question again. And the truth of the matter was, he was afraid of the answer. So he was not going to give his subconscious the opportunity to answer. And so how could he move forward with that? So what we had to do is deal with the fear of the answer. It ironically turned out that he said, "Well, I'm afraid that I'm going to find out something about myself that I can't live with." How many of you have had that feeling? What if there's something about me that I won't like if I find out? Like I have a skeleton in my psychic closet. And that scares a lot of people off from dialoguing. Because not only is it they're scared of the answer, they don't think they would know what to do with it when they got it. Now I got this skeleton, what do I do with it? Now let me tell you something about dialoguing. There's no way that your subconscious is ever going to tell you something you're not ready for. If it doesn't think you're going to be able to handle it, it's not going to tell you. Plain and simple. I've had some fascinating experiences working with clients in hypnoanalysis. This is where we get a different kind of hypnotic state, and I do a dialogue with their subconscious. And a couple of times it's happened where I have asked a particular question, and the subconscious has said to me, "But I can't tell you that." And what's the reason? She'll hear. Well, what would be wrong with her hearing it? Oh, she's not ready to deal with this yet. There's no way she's not ready to deal with this yet. So when do you think she will be ready? Next week. I thought that was interesting in that case. Next week. Well, what would the difference make between now and next week? I can prepare her. You can help me prepare her to know this. Okay. So, okay, you're going to leave it until next week. Can you tell me about it? Oh, yes, I can tell you. But we're not going to. Well, okay, so what do we do about this now? Have her go to sleep, and then I'll tell you. Okay, had her go to sleep, and it told me the story. I could understand why she wouldn't be ready at this point to hear all this. So then when I had the story complete, brought her conscious mind back, and so she can hear again. She had absolutely no awareness whatsoever of what the conversation I had had in that brief period that she was sleeping and what it was about until the next week. So I am absolutely certain, based on all my years of experience with people, you're not going to learn anything you're not ready to know or to deal with. So there doesn't need to be any fear whatsoever. Actually, you see, your subconscious has the job of protecting you. It protects you from the things that you're afraid of. It protects you from yourself. And it does it in all good intention. it's not like it's keeping secrets deliberately, because actually it suffers greatly with these secrets. A lot of the pain, a lot of the anguish that people experience, a lot of the things that people go through that are stored in the subconscious has to live with it all the time. And all that energy of all those emotions and all those things that have happened are stored in the subconscious, and it has to deal with it. It takes up an enormous amount of energy for the subconscious to deal with those things. And it would love some help to deal with them. It would love to be able to get your help, enlist your help to be able to work through some issues to tell you, but it isn't going to until you're ready. There's so many times that I've worked with people that they have found out things when they've dialogued with their subconscious, things that they never even had thought that they would know about themselves. How many times have people totally surprised themselves with the answer they get from the subconscious because they didn't know even that much about themselves until they asked. And it's only in your dreams, only when your conscious mind is sleeping. Your subconscious never, ever sleeps. It's on duty 24 hours a day. And only in your dreams, or when you're sleeping actually, does the subconscious have total freedom to express itself, uninhibited by the conscious mind. The conscious mind does a tremendous job of inhibiting the subconscious from expressing itself. In the previous session we were talking about confidence, and that's one of the things the subconscious helps a person do. If they're afraid of something, if they're lacking confidence in something, the subconscious will protect them from acting forward on that. In other words, okay, boss, you're scared. Okay, I won't let you do that. So the subconscious is very protective. It wants to help, but it needs help in helping you a lot of times. So dialoguing is very, very important in that ability to help yourself. I don't know that probably had I not had my own initial dialogue with my subconscious, which I attribute to luck of having a wonderful subconscious that was able to advise me what I needed to do to heal, to get well, the changes that I needed to make within myself in order to be a healthy person, I got from my subconscious. And I was lucky because it just happened within me at a very appropriate time. And I think one of the reasons that it happened at that time is because my defenses were down. I had let go of my life in a sense. And once I let go of my life as I knew it, my subconscious found an opening to come to me and say, aha, this is the truth. And I was in a position to listen. And it took me a while to trust, but I learned to trust. And so the subconscious is always looking for openings. How many times have you been driving along in your car or doing something and an idea pops into your mind? Something people say right out of the blue. Do you ever think it's your subconscious giving it to you? Most people say, I thought of this. I had this idea. I'm not giving the subconscious credit for finding an opportunity to break through into your consciousness. When it does that, and I'm sure you've all heard of the Freudian slip too, haven't you?
Yes.
Where you open your mouth and you put your foot in it, that kind of thing. Where you say something and you think, where did that come from? And sometimes give yourself away, not just to yourself but to other people, and that surprises you. So the subconscious once in a while can break through and tell you something important, give you a little hint about something. But only in your dreams. And I will tell you, if you want to enhance your dialoguing with your subconscious, one of the greatest ways to do it is keep track of your dreams. Because in your dreams, your subconscious is speaking its own language purely in its own language. Now, most people don't understand their dreams because the subconscious speaking in its own language is speaking symbolic terms. It's speaking in symbols and metaphors. And it's very personal. But once you start letting your subconscious know that you want this open communication, it's delighted. One way you could do it is before you go to bed at night, let's use this word, program your subconscious to awaken you with dream recall in the morning. and then write it down. Don't wait. Don't wait. Just immediately you open your eyes with that dream in your head, write it down in all the details that you can remember. And that will be the beginning of another kind of communication with your subconscious. It would take some time and some work to translate the symbols of your dreams into language that you understand. And I can help you do that. Or maybe we'll plan another workshop to do that. The point is that once you start that communication, whichever way you begin, it tells your subconscious you're interested. That it doesn't have to do everything all by itself in another range of your consciousness. It's not isolated in its communication. And then, of course, you want to be open to listening all the time. Now, if you close your eyes right now, just close your eyes. And don't think anything, just listen. Now, before you forget, jot down what you heard in your head right now. Jot it down. What was it, Alana? Blank?
I forgot as soon as I opened.
Oh, yeah. As soon as she opened her eyes. The next time you do that, don't open your eyes. Write it down, okay? But that's, again, because what happened is you got distracted, and it can happen to... How many people found that they lost it very quickly once they passed through and went? Just you. Just you were lucky with that today. Okay.
I heard quietness.
Well, that's good. It's nice if you have a quiet mind. A quiet mind is good. You need to quiet your mind a lot of times. But unless you have that quiet, you can't listen. Now, there's a lot of cacophony, let's face it, that goes on in your conscious mind. And this is where people often also get a little bit confused, is what is conscious and what is subconscious? Now, when you are thinking, when you are doing your ordinary everyday thinking, it doesn't mean that your subconscious is not participating. But it's conscious. It is the level, let's say from the top of your head up here, okay, this is that. Anything below that is subconscious, you might say. And we're drawing an analogy here. It's not necessarily that way. But when you're thinking, it doesn't, you may be drawing on your subconscious, but it isn't you communicating with your subconscious the way I'm describing when I'm talking about dialoguing. That is not a dialogue with your subconscious. That stuff that goes on the conscious level where there's, I'm thinking, let's think, what am I going to buy at the grocery store? When am I going to get to the cleaners? And things like that. All those things about the job, that type of thing, the everyday kinds of stuff, is thinking, and that's conscious. Sometimes something comes from the subconscious to remind you. It might pop into your head, oh, I must remember to do such and such. All right? But most of the time, that conscious thinking is what I call the chatterbox brain, the chatterbox mind, that just does all this give, take, back and forth on the thinking level. The subconscious isn't that it doesn't think. It doesn't think in the same way that your conscious mind thinks. Put it this way, your conscious mind does deductive reasoning. It deduces things, just like a detective, okay? The subconscious does inductive reasoning. In other words, it induces things. This is why it's so interesting for people when they find things out. They say, how does it get that? How did 2 and 2 come to 7? Because it works out like that sometimes. And interestingly enough, there are people who, on the conscious level, will interpret something one way, and on the subconscious, interpret it in another way. So the conscious mind is going about interpreting something totally different, and often in a way that handicaps their own performance or their own lives in some way. How many times when we've done dialogues in my office with clients, or I've done analysis, and the conscious mind will say to me afterwards, when it gets the information, it will say, But that's ridiculous, I didn't think that. Or, that's silly, I didn't take it that way, I knew he didn't mean that. But on the subconscious level, it came back was, that really hurt. I had a case some years ago with a gentleman, and he had had a very trying time, and he had done all kinds of therapy before he came to me. And when we started, we were making quite good progress. And he said at one point, I don't feel satisfied with my progress. I want to go faster. I want to go further ahead. I need to feel, after all these years, I know I'm onto the right thing now. I want to move ahead. I want this problem resolved. And so I said, well, what would you like to do? He said, well, I read something in your waiting room about somebody who did analysis. He said, I'd like to have analysis. And I explained analysis to him, and he said, good, let's go for it. And I wasn't 100% sure at that point that we really needed to do that. I only want to do what we really need to do. Anyway, so he persuaded me. I said, okay. In the analysis, he went back to a time when he had had in his conscious mind a very minor hurt. Just small. I know she didn't mean it. No big deal. Forget all about it. But from that moment on, that man was not able to function sexually. So what's the first thing he said when he came out of hypnosis? He says, that is ridiculous. For all these years, I haven't been able to function sexually because that happened and it was no big deal and I knew it at the time. He said, and I hated to hear this, but he said, my subconscious must be crazy. And it didn't make any sense to him whatsoever. I said, well, just a minute. There's a reason that you took it that way, and we haven't got to that yet. There has to be a reason that you responded in that particular way, at that particular time, to this, what you're saying is a rather trivial thing. So we go back in, and we ask the subconscious, could you explain to us, please, the reason that this had such a profound effect on your behavior? And the subconscious said, oh yes, very easily. And this is what the explanation was. When I was a little boy, my father and mother had a wonderful relationship. He said they were very affectionate and they got along very well. And he said I'd see my father give my mother a cuddle and they'd give each other a kiss. And he said it was very nice and everything. He said I got some of that too. He said I got cuddles and kisses and it was very nice. He said, but sometimes, he said, when my father was giving my mother a hug, he would look over at me and he'd wink and he'd say, watch out for them because they're going to hurt you one of these days. And all those years since then, the subconscious had been waiting for that moment when she was going to hurt him. And accidentally, she did. And the conscious mind knew that it was an accident. And the subconscious understood. But it also knew that this is what it is, never going to happen again. Never going to let that happen again. It's a good thing we found out, right? If we don't know the reasons, it's very difficult sometimes to completely resolve. We can sometimes override these things, and we do. We overcome events in our past. We literally change our minds about how we're going to respond to them. We're not going to let that bother us anymore. But when something is so deeply embedded in the subconscious in terms of an idea or a concept of something, then we operate on a principle. So what happened was the subconscious decided it wasn't ever going to put him in that position again to be hurt that way. This is what his father had always warned him about. And so we had to fix that, obviously. So what your conscious mind thinks is important, what your conscious mind thinks is meaningful or significant may not be the same as what your subconscious thinks. So you have to ask questions. Now, it's very, very important to learn how to ask the question properly. So the first thing you must do is ask yourself the question. Before you ask your subconscious any question, what do I want to know? Exactly what do I want to know? If you can define your question clearly and definitely, you are much more likely to be able to ask in an effective way. So say, for example, you wanted to know the reason, and also this is the way to formulate a question. Not asking why. How do you go about asking a question then? If you're not allowed to ask why, and why is not a useful question. Another reason why is not useful is because, for example, the how is more important. If, say, for example, a child asks a mother, why is the sky blue? She can't answer that question. Now, if you said, how does the sky get to be blue? If she understands the effect of light on moisture and atmosphere and everything else, she might be able to explain how the sky gets to be blue. But why? It's an impossible question. That's a question for God to answer. But we can't answer all the whys. We can think we do a lot of times, but we really don't. The why are roses the color they are? You could say, if I said to you, why are you here today? What would you say?
Because I wanted to hear what you had to say.
Because you wanted to hear what I had to say. So that's so you don't, but that's an understandable answer, right? That's a simple one. But how many questions do you ask of your subconscious that are that simple? Because usually any question you ask of your subconscious has got to be much more important than that in terms of your personal, deepest inner self and the reasons you do what you do. So the reason you came here, why, I asked why, that's not easy for me to do anymore, that you will give me an explanation. But there's probably something more deeply involved in that if we wanted to say, well, why did you want to hear what I had to say? I wouldn't ask it that way. What's the reason you wanted to hear what I had to say?
Because I thought it would help me learn how to better dialogue with my subconscious.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we come about probably to the same kind of answer on something like this. But when you ask your subconscious why, remember, you asked my conscious intellectual mind that question. I asked your conscious intellectual, and I gave you my conscious intellectual answer. The subconscious, on the other hand, isn't going to give you an intellectual response. It isn't dealing with you on an intellectual level. It doesn't mean that you can't ask your subconscious questions concerning intellectual issues. Believe me, it's quite brilliant and would probably be able to answer them very well. There's a professor in there. Okay? But the point is that by asking questions without the why, you're forced to question more carefully and more specifically. So, what is it you want to know? Phrase it very carefully. And then be ready to peel it away in layers. Because you're not going to get the whole story necessarily right away. So you end up having to ask questions about your answers, and questions about those answers, and questions about those. So you're kind of peeling it off in layers or digging a little bit deeper all the time to get to the root of the issue within you. This is one of the reasons why when I do hypnoanalysis, when people say to me, well, I'd like to have an analysis, and I tell them, well, okay, well, you need to block off a whole day. 12 hours. They go, oh, my God. 12 hours on that chair? Yep. How come? How come? Because the answers are not that direct and they're not that simple, and sometimes they take a very long time to get. My record to date in doing analysis, the record in terms of the time I ask the question and by the time I get the answer is 47 minutes. Oh, Georgia, you don't look very happy with that.
You actually waited for it?
I waited for 47 minutes. Now, I know from experience how to be patient, obviously, and I also know that most people, when they ask a question of their subconscious, don't wait. That's why so many times when I have them take their 3 deep breaths and on the chair in my office, and I even formulate the question for them. And sometimes, even though I've very well formulated the question, they'll change it in their heads and ask something different. But I formulate the question, and they take their 3 deep breaths, and they ask the subconscious the question, and a few seconds later they open their mind and say, I can get an answer. And they didn't wait long enough. Okay, now I want you to be very patient. I say, I want you to take your 3 deep breaths again. I want you to ask the question, and I want you to wait for an answer. How long do I have to wait, they say? As long as it takes. And you may not even get it today. You mean I could use up my whole session and still not get an answer? That actually hasn't happened. I don't allow that to happen in the sense that if a person's not getting responses, and I want to make very good use of the time in my office with me, so I will then give them instructions to keep listening and waiting for the answer while we deal with the issue in another way, or they'll just say, we're just not going to get it today. We'd still do our best to get it. But most people are not patient. When they ask that question, they expect the answer to just pop right up just like that. And it isn't always going to happen that way. So patience is one of the keys to good dialoguing. How many times have you gone to bed at night with something on your mind and a question on your mind, and you've woken up in the morning with the answer? How many times have you woke up in the night with the answer? Because I guarantee your subconscious will give it to you as soon as it has it. It's not going to keep it from you. Okay. I'm sure during the break you've all thought of lots of questions you would like to ask your subconscious, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yes. Anybody want to share any questions with me that they would like to ask their subconscious? Yes, Georgia.
Okay, I know what I want to do. I know that I can do it, but I don't do it.
I don't do it. Do you hear how your subconscious might hear that?
Yeah.
I don't do it. That sounds kind of final.
Well, I'm mad. I'm angry that I'm not doing it.
Okay, so here's what we've talked about before. 1 foot on the accelerator, 1 foot on the brake, right? When you are not doing something that you know you want to do, you need to explore the reasons. When a person, for example, if you want to define it as procrastination, as one example. When you procrastinate, there's a reason you procrastinate. Now, some people tell me, and I don't always agree with this, they say, well, it's because I'm lazy. And if you look up the word lazy in the dictionary, you'll know that it means averse to work. So if you have an aversion to work, then you're lazy. And I don't know how many people have an aversion to work, but you have lazy is lack of motivation, basically, in my definition. So if your motivation isn't strong enough to override whatever is going on, you need to question. The simplest question here is, what's the reason, although I believe that I want to do this, that I haven't done it so far? That would be a good way to formulate the question. And then listen very carefully for the answer, because as they say, it may not all come up all at once. And listen, and you may, if you ask yourself the question right now, and that's the important thing, when the question is on your mind, don't keep putting off asking it, because that's another form of procrastination, right? So what is it you're concerned about in terms of answering the question? Do you want to know the answer? If it's that when you want to move forward and you feel like it's a conscious or subconscious resistance to move it, to doing it.
I think it's conscious, actually, now.
Pardon?
Conscious.
Conscious. So your conscious mind is resisting the action. So are you consciously aware of the reasons?
Yes, but I'm scared to verbalize them to myself. I kind of like keep pushing them away when they come to me.
So what would be the fear of knowing?
I have no excuses.
No excuses. Excuse me, when somebody says I have an excuse, what's the reason for the excuse?
Fear. It's always back to fear with me.
And what's the fear about? See, this is what you have to ask. What am I afraid of? What is this fear about? And you keep asking until you get the answers for that. It's something that stops you. If you recognize your conscious mind, because a lot of times if you realize your subconscious is trying to push you forward, you get the nudge, do it, and then no, and it's like back and forth. But if you know it's coming from, the motivation is subconscious and the resistance is conscious, then you've got at least the understanding your subconscious is not in your way. If it had a reason for you not to do it, you would be able to find that out too. So you've got to investigate something like that. Unless, of course, now I have to say this, and I'm not saying in your case necessarily, but many times I find that people, in a way, kind of like these situations in their lives where they have this dynamic of wanting and not wanting, and it's exciting. It's like a little battle that you're living every day of your life, and if a person's life isn't exciting enough, sometimes they'll keep something like this going to keep themselves stimulated. You see, in other words, I do a lot of couples work, and I found that some couples have come to me and they tell me they fight a lot. And sometimes when I listen to the fights that they have, and they're usually about nothing in particular, same old thing over and over again, but that's the only excitement they have in the relationship. So to stop fighting is boring. And this is what I think some people find in themselves, is they don't fight with themselves a little bit. They don't feel normal because they've been doing it for so long. So to keep the fight up, to keep the resistance going, and if you don't, again, perceive yourself as, let me ask you something. Can you visualize in your mind's eye actually doing this?
Yeah.
Yes. You just figured it out? Oh, but this is the whole thing. You cannot figure it out.
No, I mean, I got the answer.
You got the answer.
But I knew the answer, but I didn't want to know it.
And now you know it?
Yeah?
And you're okay with it?
No.
No?
Well, family disapproval. And that's a really big one because family is priority number one to me.
So if the family disapproves, what does that mean?
Chaos.
Hmm?
Chaos, rejection.
Yes. And that's what you expect?
Well, I expect criticism probably.
So then one of the things I would suggest you ask your subconscious is, how do I go ahead and do what I do and be comfortable with myself about it and deal with the consequences in terms of other people's opinions about it? Because you can't please everybody. You can't do your life for other people. You need to do it for yourself. And so what if they disapprove? They don't live your life. They're not in your skin. They don't have your reasons.
They won't love me anymore.
Oh. Are you quite sure of that? No, you're not sure of that. Love isn't something people turn on and off like a switch. I don't love you anymore because you didn't do something I approve of. They may not like what you do, and they may give you a hard time about it, but you can deal with that. And you can enlist your subconscious to help you deal with that. And that's one of the things about dialoguing. You can reach within yourself and access the resources, asking your subconscious, help me do this. Help me work with what I have within me to accomplish this, to do it well, to cope with whatever goes on about that. Because there's not going to be anything in life that's going to be laid out for you in completely where you're not going to get everybody's approval, right? So, and it's pretty hard to deal with it this moment, right? Thinking about it. But then, I noticed. It's a tough situation for you, but you need to, again, go in within and draw from your subconscious what you need. And also, you're making assumptions. You're foretelling. You're living in the future. And when you do that, you can't live in the now, and you can't do now what you need to do. So that's the fear of that. Okay, anybody else had a question? Yes, Gretchen.
It's something that I've been concerned about for a while, and it's that there's a couple things going on. I need to grow, and where I'm at work, I think I'm at a dead end. Plus the fact my financial assistance from my ex-husband is going to end beginning this coming year. And I want to find another position to grow in, but also to earn more money in. And I've had blocks in the past about looking for other work, doing the want ads and all that, not having a huge network of friends for contacts and all that. It's been intimidating for me. How can I effectively word a question to my subconscious mind? You know, one of the things somebody mentioned to me, have you considered doing something totally different? Well, I'm going to college. I'm working on a bachelor's degree, but that's going to be a while before I get it. There's a big part of me believes there's a way I can earn more money, do something totally different, and still work on getting my bachelor's degree.
So what do you want to know?
I want to know what kind of work I could do and earn, more money, but
Good
also
question.
fulfill that.
Good question. Direct question. What kind of work could I do that would earn me more money? Directly ask the question.
Well, is that going to set, because also what I want as part of this is to set the foundation for further guidance. So when I take, okay, it gives me an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then, it might be something that just totally blows me away consciously, but I want to be able to be open and receptive to my subconscious guidance.
Sure.
So once I get the answer to this, okay, is there something else I can say to help me keep me on a good roll with it?
Well, once you ask the question and you get the answer, say, for example, it said, change course in your education, or become, off the top of my head, somebody is in the service industry or something. Then you would say questions about that. In other words, how would you suggest I go about that if you can't already think of it yourself? Mm-hmm. So it would be pretty much like asking anyone who is a resource person, where do I go from here? What's my next best step?
And even things like, for instance, if the answer I get back seems like something that would normally require a bachelor's degree by most companies or whatever, I can ask my subconscious mind, how can I go about this?
Right. How do I go about that? What do you recommend?
What do you recommend? Okay.
What do you recommend that I do next? What's the next best step? There are many people who don't have an education who have made great things of themselves. So, people don't have to know. That's one of the other things, is the subconscious knows what your potential is. It knows what you can do. It knows the resources. So it doesn't have the same questions about your capabilities that you do. If all you have to do is say, this is where I want to go and this is what I want to do, and then it will provide the resources for you.
So once I get the answer to this, okay, is there something else I can say to help me keep me on a good roll with it?
Well, once you ask the question and you get the answer, say, for example, it said, change course in your education, or become, off the top of my head, somebody is in the service industry or something. Then you would say questions about that. In other words, how would you suggest I go about that if you can't already think of it yourself? Mm-hmm. So it would be pretty much like asking anyone who is a resource person, where do I go from here? What's my next best step?
And even things like, for instance, if the answer I get back seems like something that would normally require a bachelor's degree by most companies or whatever, I can ask my subconscious mind, how can I go about this?
Right. How do I go about that? What do you recommend?
What do you recommend? Okay.
What do you recommend that I do next? What's the next best step? There are many people who don't have an education who have made great things of themselves. So, people don't have to know. That's one of the other things, is the subconscious knows what your potential is. It knows what you can do. It knows the resources. So it doesn't have the same questions about your capabilities that you do. If all you have to do is say, this is where I want to go and this is what I want to do, and then it will provide the resources for you. So it's a matter of what do you want to know again? Anybody else have any questions? All right, well then let's talk about how sometimes answers come up in ways that are not necessarily consciously recognizable. All right? When Elizabeth and I were talking during the break, she was talking about how something would sort of, when she asked a question, something would sort of come up to consciousness, but it wasn't a definitive thing. It wasn't even a definite feeling. Is that what you were saying? It's like something was coming up, but she couldn't quite grasp it. Now, what did you do then, Elizabeth?
I would ask, what am I feeling? Or
what am I feeling?
What is this
about? Right. So if you get something that you don't understand, even if it comes in the form of an image or a feeling, ask for an explanation. What am I experiencing? Explain this to me. Or what is this feeling about? So that whatever comes up, you are able then to explore deeper. So in other words, it's like when you're having a conversation with someone else and they haven't answered all of your questions, you're going to ask another question. Don't do what a lot of other people do. They say, yes, but. But cancels everything that went before it. Did you know that? So you don't say that, and the subconscious says, all right, forget the whole thing. We won't discuss it anymore. So you don't say yes, but. You say, and what else? Or, I didn't realize I felt that way. Or if you disagree with your subconscious, this is one that people get very upset about, is I don't agree with my subconscious on this. People have told me. On what grounds do you disagree? What are you basing that on? What you think you know about yourself? One lady asked me, she said, Elaine, could I be lying to myself? I said, no, you just haven't told yourself the truth. And it's kind of that sort of thing. So what you do is you ask, what am I basing my skepticism about the answer about? What am I challenging the answer for? So you could even ask that your subconscious. On what basis am I questioning this? And you may find out some very interesting things that way. Life and death issues can be resolved actually through a dialogue with the subconscious. In terms of dialoguing with the subconscious about your body, which, you know, in Mind Master we teach body scanning and dialoguing with your body, but a very direct way of finding out something about what's going on in your body is to ask your subconscious. What is that feeling I have in this particular part of my body? What is causing this? A lady just the other day in my office said, she said, and this was interesting, she said, I think I'm coming down with strep throat. And I said, how do you know it's strep throat? She said, well, I don't know, I just feel like it's strep throat. And I said, but where did that idea come from? She said, I don't know. And I suspected it came from the subconscious, so I said to her, just listen to your body and take a look in, then ask your subconscious, where did the idea of strep throat come in? And it took a little while for the answer to come up, and when the answer came up, it was, I know I got strep throat. Okay, well, how do you know? Go back and ask, how do you know? And she got an image, a very clear image, and it was all this redness and these little white bumps and everything else she was seeing in her throat. And she said, I've got to check this out. And she did. I don't know yet at this point whether she actually did have a strep throat in terms of a medical description, but her subconscious was telling her, and it was a strep throat. Now, I haven't seen her since then, so I've got to find out when I see her next if she really did have a strep throat. Now, that might have been an association, because I didn't ask her if she'd ever had a strep throat before. We wanted to get rid of the strep throat she had. So I told her to go to work immediately with her subconscious to apply all the healing resources and get rid of it as quickly as possible, to marshal all the resources for healing, like the antibodies that the body creates automatically, just get them to work. I wish I'd have thought to ask her if she had ever had a strep throat before. Maybe that's where she got the idea from. But if the subconscious knows every single cell in your body. It knows every corner of your mind. It knows every facet of your emotions. There isn't anything about you that it doesn't know. So you can ask anything about yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and behaviorally. What's the reason I do this? What's the reason I don't do that? Come on, give me some more questions. Anybody have any other questions?
I haven't been nice to my mother, and I wonder if it's from my... Oh, do you want me to tell the truth? Yes, I haven't been nice to my mother, Elaine, and I really would like to know if it's subconscious or conscious. I'm not sure. But I've been not very nice to my mother, like today, we had a fight, and then the last time I saw her, we had a fight.
So Michelle, so you don't want to fight anymore, and because you feel bad when you do that. So the question to ask your subconscious: what's the reason that I fight with my mother? But let's keep something in mind, shall we? It takes two to fight.
Yes.
Hmm?
Yes.
It takes two to fight. So
I'm going to ask my subconscious tonight. Yeah.
good idea.
I will.
Good.
Thanks.
All right. Any other one? Yes, John.
Could you suggest some ways, preventive medicine, things that we can tell ourselves or ask our subconscious to keep us healthy?
Oh, yes. Every single day. What you basically tell your subconscious is that I want you to use all of the necessary resources to keep me healthy in every cell in my body, in every process in my body, that my body should be maintained in an ideal condition all the time. When I'm working with people in hypnosis who are in a healing process, one of the suggestions that I give them, and I tell them to use it also as a command, is that you are to perfect every cell and process in my body. And believe me, your subconscious knows what that is. It has a blueprint for that perfection. The body was designed to heal, to recover, to repair, to restore itself, and that sort of thing. So one of the reasons that it doesn't is the negative messages that it gets from the conscious mind. All the things that we say that is like, I'm getting sick, or or somebody's got a cold, I'm going to catch a cold because I've been around this person, those kind of things. So all the negative messages. And plus, keep in mind that many illnesses are really related to psychological issues. And so the subconscious can be very helpful in understanding what that illness is, what the purpose of that illness is for that person, what the reason is they had that particular illness. I could probably in many cases guess or make a fairly educated guess when somebody comes to me and they have certain symptoms, what the psychological components are that enhanced or aggravated or even brought about those symptoms. Classic example is a lady that came to me who had asthma. And it had been developing over the years, and she was on a lot of medication, and once in a while in the emergency room in the hospital. And a lot of times the medication wouldn't even do any good. She'd still be suffering. So I had her do a dialogue with the subconscious as the cause of the asthma. Well, the first question was, because she wanted to know, what's the reason the medication isn't working? Because the doctors were saying it should be working, should be getting good results with this medication. So we don't want to get better. Well, what's the reason I don't want to get better? I don't feel like it. Well, actually, let's abbreviate the dialogue a little bit, because what we got down to is that if she felt better, she would be defying her husband. He wanted to, listen to her terminology, stifle her. He wouldn't let her breathe. Wherever she went, he was right on top of her. Where are you going? What are you doing? No, you can't go there. I'm coming with you. In every relationship, everywhere she went, he was right there, and she couldn't do anything alone. She never had any space. She couldn't breathe. And that's what the symptoms were all about. That's how she developed the asthma. The subconscious was communicating. Believe me, I can tell you it had tried so many times before asthma occurred to tell her what was happening inside of her and how she was feeling about the way she was being treated in this marriage. And she didn't listen. Her subconscious was probably saying, he's stifling you. And she'd say, yeah, but I love him. Yeah, but you know he's not letting you breathe easy. You know you can't go out and he doesn't let you. He's right on top of you all the time. He's suffocating you. Yeah, but I'm afraid to go out on my own. I need him. Whatever the things that she told herself. So eventually the subconscious, how am I going to get through to you? Okay, you want to be stifled? This is what it really feels like. This is what I feel like. The subconscious is often telling you what it feels like. And when you're not telling yourself. Often illness is a symbolic reference to what you are feeling emotionally. I had a lady with MS whose symptoms completely disappeared after she had done a dialogue in my office. When she discovered that she was afraid to make a movement in her life from a very common reason, fear of being criticized. She was afraid to make a move that might be challenged by someone else, that somebody else wouldn't believe in or somebody else wouldn't. And that had happened to her a few times in her life. Stop, don't go. And so the MS was the physical expression of not making a move, tucking this body around as if it couldn't move. And this is what makes dialoguing with the subconscious so crucial. Because ask yourself, for example, what's this symptom represent? How many of you have a symptom that you've dealt with for a very long time? And you've been very superficially dealing with it, either with medication or telling yourself you can live with it or live around it. But it really needs to be listened to. It could be your subconscious talking to you and you haven't been listening. And then how do you know it's your subconscious talking to you? How can you tell the difference between a conscious thought and a subconscious thought? Well, here's one way. When you ask your subconscious a question, do you immediately start thinking, trying to figure it out, trying to analyze it? Because if you do, that's conscious. When you dialogue with your subconscious, there is no figuring at all. There's no thinking at all. If you could have figured it out, you would have anyway, wouldn't you? And a lot of times the way you figured it out is all wrong as far as the subconscious is concerned. So don't try to figure it out. Sometimes when somebody's dialoguing and they'll say to themselves, or to me, well, I ask them, what did you get? And they'll say, well, I figured it out like this, or I've been trying, or I can't figure it out. I said, well, you're not supposed to be figuring it out. You're supposed to ask a question and be quiet and listen. If you ask me a question and I don't answer right away, what do? Try to figure me out? Try to figure out what I'm going to say? Or do you keep saying, well, come on, Elaine, tell me, come on. You don't do that, do you? You just sit there quietly and wait. You might say to me, well, if it's going to take all day, Elaine, I'm going to see you another day. Right? That's fine. But you're not going to cut off the communication. And that's so important, that you keep the communication going. Keep the line of going. Keep talking. Keep asking. Because once you have made contact and you get one little piece of information, one little message, don't just drop it. Because if you do, your subconscious might be a little hesitant to come back because it feels it might be cut off again. So you need to really listen and stay with it. Keep going. Keep asking. Be interested. One of the best ways actually sometimes to break through is to let the subconscious know that you aren't going to take a critical or judgmental stance with this, that you're just very interested, you really care to know. And we've had to do this kind of nurturing the subconscious into communicating many times because a lot of times I think the subconscious thinks it is going to get blasted. That it is a little anxious about perhaps being able to communicate with you because you may criticize, you may not trust, you may judge, you may disavow, or whatever. So important that you say to your subconscious, I really do trust you and I really do want and need an answer to this. And I'm open, I'll listen. And if you feel in the past that you have been rude to your subconscious, that you've cut it off or you haven't been responsive in some way, apologize. Hey, I'm sorry. I was rude. Or I wasn't patient enough. I wasn't listening. I promise I'll do better now. I'm open. You can even tell your subconscious, believe me, there's nothing you have to tell your subconscious really in terms it knows. But you can say, you know, I'm a bit scared of getting into this subject. And your subconscious will probably say, I know. But are you going to hear a voice in your head? Some people think they should hear a voice in their head, and I always tell them, if you hear another voice in your head, you call me right away. Unless it's yours, and you know it's yours. Okay. But a lot of people think that's what they're going to hear, like another voice of some kind in their head. And that's not what you're going to hear. You're going to hear a thought. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't come in a voice-like way, because I know that I've had answers to my subconscious where it feels like almost another voice in my head. I have an ongoing dialogue with my subconscious, really. And this has developed over years and years, of course. And I encourage people to do this, to have this ongoing dialogue. Always be listening, always hearing what's going on, always responding. And my subconscious seems to come to me from different places. I don't know how many of you who've dialogued have a sense of where your subconscious is coming from in your head or your body. Have you ever had that sense right there? I find it very interesting in my own experiences because when I'm doing a dialogue with my subconscious on intellectual things that are, you know, more academic or whatever, it feels like it's about here. When my subconscious is working with me, when I'm working with clients, and believe me, trust me, it's always there working with me. And it sometimes gets a word in edgeways. And a lot of times I've heard it say this, suggest that, ask this, say this. And there's so many times, it's interesting, where I find myself then talking about something and I'm thinking to myself, I don't know why I'm talking about this. It's not relevant with this client right now. And I'm thinking, well, okay, Sabi, I'll go ahead and I'll do it. And then that person will say to me, you know, that's really funny. You should say that, Elaine. And it turns out to be very relevant to them. One time not too long ago, I was talking about my subconscious prompted me to tell about this young man that I had worked with many years, had been in my mind mastery class, who had, he was one of these martial arts people, and he'd won all kinds of, you know, belts and medals and everything else. And he said he wanted martial arts for the mind, so that's why he came to mind mastery. And during the break of the first session, he came up to me and he said, Elaine, he said, I had an accident several years ago. And he said, since the accident, he said, I've had a pigmentation problem with my skin. He said, I have these brown spots and these pink spots all over. And he said, do you think that mind mastery could help me? And I said, go for it. Do what you can with it. And I suggested how he's to approach it. And the fourth session of mind mastery, one of the students was asking me how come I had so much faith in the subconscious and all this sort of thing. And before I could answer the question, this young man stood up and he pulled up his sleeve and he said, well, 2 weeks ago, he said, my arm was all blotchy colored, and he said, now look, the skin is even. So anyway, I was telling this lady in therapy about this, and I'm thinking, while I'm telling her, what am I telling her this for? Because there wasn't anything to stimulate this. And then she said to me, oh, Elaine, I'm so glad you told me that. And she pulled up her sleeve. And she pulled her shirt back and showed me that she had exactly the same problem. And I would not have known that consciously. But my subconscious obviously picked it up and told me, tell her this story, because without, you couldn't say to her, do you have blotches all over your skin? You couldn't do that. So telling a story, and that happens quite a bit. So my subconscious, but when my subconscious is working with me, when I'm working with it, feels like it's here. Now obviously it's not just here, but it feels like it's here. It's like it's working on this me. Now when it's about me personally, about other issues than intellectual or more emotional, it feels like it's coming in here, in this place inside of me. So I don't know that my subconscious is shifting around necessarily, but that's where I sense it. So when it comes from over here, okay, it's about a client. When it's up here, it's about something else, and it's about me. So where do you feel it coming from? Does it feel like, one lady one time told me, she said, it comes from my solar plexus. She said, I can feel my subconscious energy in there. I don't care where you feel it as long as you do, right? As long as you get there, as long as you can sense it. And the point is to keep the dialogues going. Yes?
Is that why when sometimes you just know something's wrong with somebody? I mean, would it be your subconscious picking, when you're talking to somebody and, they're troubled or...
Mm. Well, keep in mind that you're getting a lot of clues. A lot of times when people are communicating with you, there's all kinds of what we refer to body language, tonal qualities, what you're used to seeing in that person. If it looks a little different than you're used to seeing, you have those clues. But then sometimes there are no rational inferences. In this particular case with this lady, I had no rational inference. I had nothing to go on. But I honestly do believe that just as our subconscious and conscious mind communicate, the subconscious communicates with other people's subconscious. And that can explain so much of what goes on in our lives, where people say things and do things that feel very familiar to us, or somebody just happens to say something you've been thinking, or they understand you very well. And how does that happen, that they can really relate to you in that way? Now, does anybody have any other questions? Yes.
I'm not sure it's okay to bring this question up in this particular seminar, but I've always had difficulty differentiating between my subconscious self and my ideal self. Isn't my ideal self something that's somewhere in my subconscious self?
Your ideal self is all the attributes that you draw from the resources to express from the subconscious. So in other words, you're using the subconscious resources to express the ideal self. The ideal self is a personality that you create from the resources within yourself. Does that help?
I think so.
And that's not always up until now, right? That you had difficulty. You had difficulty in the past.
Well, I just never was sure
In the
where
past,
the two
right.
were related.
But the language is what I'm pointing out. Is she said, I always have difficulty, and always, as far as the subconscious is concerned, is forever and ever, amen. Always for the subconscious is forever, and all the ways that it can happen. So you have to be careful with your language.
So you're saying the ideal self is really just created out of the self-conscious.
Right, right.
Or subconscious, I mean.
Yeah. Well, when people say self-conscious, I don't usually correct that, because it is your self-conscious. It's subconscious. It's below the level of awareness. Anything that's below the level of your conscious awareness is subconscious. And actually, that's far greater and much vaster than anything you have on your conscious level. So it is yourself, and it is your conscious. It's just another level of consciousness. But what you draw from your subconscious, when what Ilana is talking about is that the ideal self that she wants to express, and we refer to that in for a lot of people that come to me, for example, with weight issues, is for them to identify their ideal self, the self that they choose to be. Because most people, unfortunately, who come to me with weight problems are more identified with their fat self, which is not them. You are not your body, right? So The ideal self is the person that you choose to be, physically, mentally, emotionally, behaviorally. Ideal. Not perfect. Ideal. And we all strive for that. We all strive to be ideal. And so it's a good concept for anybody. What is the person they choose to be? What's that person about? And so that helps. Yes?
I have a question on hypnosis because I'm very limited in this field, but my experiences in the Army where they did the hypnosis, for demonstrations. You've seen them at professional magicians. And I believe that can be done from what I've experienced. When you're talking about hypnosis, to me I thought it would be you could put someone under hypnosis and talk to them and access their subconscious mind and get the answers.
Well, that's exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about dialoguing, except you don't necessarily need hypnosis, because the subconscious is always there and it's always ready to communicate. And the only reason you use hypnosis is to bypass the conscious mind's sense of restraint that it puts on the subconscious, the inhibition, the not wanting to, or the fears of. And by going into a relaxed state, which is basically what we're talking about with hypnosis, relaxing the conscious mind, the critical, analytical, questioning, demanding conscious mind, and bypassing that, we enable the subconscious to more freely bring up. But when I teach people self-hypnosis, and I teach all of my clients self-hypnosis, is to enable them to be able to make dialoguing even easier as well. So when you want to do a dialogue, you can take your 3 deep breaths and relax, and then facilitate the communication. But it doesn't mean that if you're driving your car someplace, you couldn't get into a dialogue with your subconscious, because you do anyway. I see people all the time when they're driving their cars, or their passengers even, how's it going away? And they're talking out loud to themselves.
But when you treat people, wouldn't it be simpler just for you to put them in a state, bypass their conscious mind, and just get into their subconscious and say...
It would save me a lot of work. It really would. But you know what? My principles of working with people are to actualize their potential, to teach them the ways, because they're not going to be with me forever. The whole idea is your success is my success, so you're going to be on your way. I want you to take with you the skills, the abilities to work with yourself for the rest of your life. And the other thing is if we put someone or guide someone into hypnosis and get their conscious mind out the way, they don't know necessarily if they're going to be in that kind of altered state where their conscious mind is far enough away. They may not be able to bring back with them recollection of that, and therefore they're not going to be able to integrate. And integration is such a crucial element of therapy. It's not enough that the subconscious knows it, and it wouldn't be enough for me to just know it. That person must know it too. And the other thing is, say for example, I put someone, or guide someone into hypnosis, and their conscious mind goes away, which can happen in hypnosis. And some people, you know yourself, your mind's gone away sometimes. It's like, where'd it go? Someplace else. You come back and you say, where have I been? Have I been sleeping or something? No, you weren't. You just went nice and deep, and your conscious mind just went to sleep in a different way. So I'm now doing a dialogue with the subconscious. I know all about this. The subconscious knows all about this. Now we bring this person out of hypnosis, and now we're going to tell them all about this. And they're going to go, really? Oh, wow. How are they going to be better off? Not much. It's only when you hear it within yourself that it makes a profound difference. I know I can give people insight when I'm working with them. I do it all the time. You know how I do it? I ask them questions. And I can often sense what their answers are going to be. But the point is, unless you hear it within yourself, it's not the same. Elaine told me, I said. It's not the same. Yes, Georgia.
But while you have the subject under hypnosis, can you as a mentor or coach can do it, resolve that problem?
Oh, that's the whole purpose. It's not enough to know.
But can you give them information that this situation will no longer harm them, and
Oh, sure.
be able for them to...
But you know, one of the first things I do, Georgia, is I ask the subconscious, what do you suggest we do about this?
But
I ask the subconscious usually, and if the subconscious needs some help, I'm happy to give it.
wouldn't it be faster if you get it under that state?
Oh, of course you do it then. Absolutely. I mean, when I do a hypnoanalysis, or even if somebody's doing a dialogue in my office with me, then what I'll do is once we get the information we need, we will work towards resolution.
No, but I mean if they're under that state where they're not conscious,
Mhm.
their conscious is not in operation.
They're going to be conscious when I work with them, yeah.
So you wouldn't use the other type of hypnosis where their conscious mind is not there.
Well, I don't use that kind where the conscious mind goes away completely, because I make sure that I get the kind of state where the conscious mind is aware, where it can listen, but not interfere.
If the conscious mind was not there, wouldn't it be faster to resolve a certain problem between you and the subconscious with you giving the subconscious?
Not necessarily faster and not as good as. We can accomplish the same thing even better with the conscious mind, because now we will have integration. And that's very, very important, that the conscious mind participate in order for it to be integrated on all levels of consciousness. So that the person, for example, doesn't walk about thinking, well, this is what happens, because it has happened sometimes when I've given people suggestions in hypnosis and they haven't remembered the suggestion, or they're not even sure, and they walk about and they do something, but it doesn't feel like it's them. It feels really strange. It feels like they're acting out in a dream almost, because there's no integration. So I work towards integration. It's so important. And that's why with your conscious mind participating fully, we can resolve things just as quickly and just as thoroughly. But when we get the conscious and the subconscious to do teamwork, wonderful things happen, right? And that's what it's all about. That's what dialoguing is about, is to work as a team. Any other questions? Yes, Vladimir.
When you talk to your subconscious about pain or sickness or healing, do you need to know your body anatomically in the smallest detail, or it is not necessary at all?
Well, the question is whether it's necessary to know in all the detail about the body. It's not necessary because the subconscious knows it. But it may not have names for it that a doctor would have, or that you would find in an anatomy book. Although it has been quite intriguing to me that when sometimes people do come up with something that is very, specific in medical terms. And the only way we can explain that is either the person heard something like that, or they have seen something in a book or something like that, or the subconscious knows instinctively. But the point is, whatever is in your body, your subconscious knows about it. And it can tell you if something's not right. How many people here actually do dialogues with their body?
Sometimes.
Okay. So dialoguing with your body, what, have you learned some things? Have you discovered some things that you didn't know before?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't do it enough.
You didn't in the past.
But yes, from this point on, I do. Notice I avoided that one word.
Good.
I said and.
Good. Okay, Susan, what was your question?
No, nothing. I
Oh.
dialogue.
Oh, okay.
But what do you mean by that?
Pardon?
Are you saying dialogue with your subconscious about your body?
Yeah. Well, when in Mind Mastery, I teach dialoguing with your body. You do body scans and dialogue with your body. But you can go much, actually what you are doing is your body and your subconscious are both communicating. In other words, your subconscious is scanning your body in a sense, and then it will bring back to you. But when I say do it directly with your body, it means to consciously work with your body and get to know your body really well, and so you know when something isn't quite right, or when you know something's wrong, you can immediately work on fixing it, on healing it. So, okay.
I'd just like to share an anecdote to go back to the when you said our subconscious minds may be connected, and I believe they are, or that we're somehow all connected in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
When you were sending out these announcements for this course, I hadn't really communicated with you in months, and one night I had a dream that I received a letter in the mailbox I could see myself going out to the mailbox. It was from you. I didn't really know what it was about, but it was something in the letter. And I went to the mailbox the next day, and there was the first letter about this conference. And I thought, well, that's really neat, because I've been kind of looking at this, this connection. So a few weeks later, I had that dream again, but it was much more metaphorical. It was kind of something, it was more like a phone call or some strange symbols. But certainly you had contacted me in some way. Well, I was very busy at the time, so it's infrequent that this happens, but I didn't pick up my mail the next day at my mailbox. So this thought went away that I had had this dream. So a day later, I went up the mailbox, and there was an announcement, the second announcement for this. Well, interestingly, I had said, the day that I didn't get it, I forgot I didn't get the mail, so I'm like, well, there goes that theory, It's really not connected, because maybe the first one was just a fluke. But it happened twice, and that's a true story.
Now it's going to get the lottery
But see, that sort of thing does not surprise me. I mean, what we refer to as ESP is much more common phenomena than most people would recognize. They all explain it away with it's coincidence or whatever, but the best way to define ESP, extrasensory perception, is very simple. If you have no rational inference. If you have some rational inference, and you may not consciously know what that is, and you have an idea, which what we would call intuition, an intuitive sense of something. And intuition is a combination of intellect and instinct working together. They come together and it just clicks and you just know. But ESP has no rational inference at all. So how could you possibly know, you see? And I don't know the last time we spoke, John, even. So, and I don't know how many people I actually mentioned that I was going to do this. So, good for your subconscious. Tell it to keep up the good work. Yeah. Tell it you like that experience and you want to keep doing that. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Gretchen.
I understood you to say, like, if we've been harsh with our subconscious, apologize. Say thank you when it gives you something good, or to work on. I want to be sure I understand correctly. Like, I remember the technique of when we do the thing about eye control, relax. That may be something beyond here, but eye control, relax. Then you give the direction to the subconscious, and right now I'm having a blind for some reason about the rest of it. But you can say thank you in it, but did I understand correctly? You don't say please beforehand. It's more to be more of a directive, a command.
A command is a command. You're not asking. You're telling.
Okay, and that's the way it's best done.
With the you control command, you're commanding. No ifs, ands, buts, and maybes. You're not saying, please, will you do this? It's okay to say thank you when it's done. Okay. It doesn't mean that you're being disrespectful or bossy, although you're the boss. If you take an authoritative approach, not an authoritarian approach, you get further. You see. But it doesn't, thanking your subconscious basically is letting it know that you appreciate what it does. Do you have any idea what it does for you? Most people don't have any ideas what all the things your subconscious does for you all the time.
Just to be sure I'm on the right track, like with this affirmation, it ties in with something you were talking about earlier, to say to my subconscious mind, you are to keep all of my bodily, mental, emotional, behavioral processes in perfect, healthy working order.
That's one way of saying it.
It is?
That's one way of saying it, sure.
Well, one way, is it a good one?
It's a good way, yeah. Okay. That's fine, yeah. In good working order. Yeah.
We should get this down pat to improve our golf game and use them.
See, now you're all laughing and I missed what he said, so what did you say? I'm sorry.
I said, if this would work for improving our golf game, you'd...
Oh, it does. Absolutely it does. You know how many people come to me just to improve their golf game? I've got more golf stories than golfers do. So, I think...
He was dubious about the whole process until now. He knows he can improve his golf game.
Actually, whatever you want from your subconscious, if you approach it correctly, you can get. That's the intriguing part of it, is the incredible potential that's there that can be accessed and employed in your life If you don't stay in touch with your subconscious, if you don't work with it, how are you ever going to fully achieve it? Not that I think you can ever achieve your potential. You can't, because it keeps expanding, keeps growing. So you're constantly exploring it. And if you work with your subconscious in the right ways, if you stay in touch, if you stay in communication, you can't help but succeed. It may take you a while. Not that your subconscious isn't perfect either, and that's something else that some people ask me. Can my subconscious be wrong? Yes. In what way? At the time that you ask the question, that answer may be true for you, or with the understanding that the subconscious has at the time, that may be true for you, and that could change a second later for all kinds of reasons, because we are constantly changing, we're constantly learning, we're constantly adjusting and adapting, so is the subconscious. And what is true at this moment may not be true the next moment. And you have to keep that in mind. So it's not that it can be wrong in that it's all wrong. And also it only can go with what it knows. And sometimes what it knows isn't very good, based on some of the lessons it's been received. And it's quite open to being educated. It's quite open to change. It wants to know, wants to do a good job. It tries very hard to do a good job. All we have to do is help it, not hinder it. So staying in communication. I think our time is up, is it?
Time is up.
Time is up. Okay. I've really enjoyed you all. Thanks for coming.